Hello, everyone. You are very welcome to what is the 6th episode in our series celebrating social marketing. Social marketing, for many of you who are working in the field will know, is 50 years plus. And for those of you who are new to social marketing, you are about to explore and discover a very vibrant, active, passionate, theory and practice-based behavioural change domain. So once again, I have the pleasure of welcoming you to the Whitaker series on social marketing, A Rebel Turning 50. And importantly, I have the pleasure of introducing you to two fantastic speakers, world-renowned social marketers. So we're both privileged and honoured to have Professor Jeff French and Professor Suzanne Suggs join us. Jeff is joining us from the UK and Suzanne is joining us from the University of Lugano. And both are interestingly talking to the same topic, but without consulting and conferring with each other. So we're in for a very interesting discussion about social marketing, where social marketing has come from, and more importantly, where we're going. So when you look at climate change, you look at the pandemic, you look at the inequalities, you look at sustainability and biodiversity. Never was there a need for a strong implementation science around behavioral change, stakeholder change, around system change than social marketing offers. In terms of housekeeping, you'll have a wonderful opportunity to put questions to Professor Jeff French and Professor Suzanne Suggs towards the end of the session. You can do that through the question and answer button, or alternatively, you'll be able to raise your hand as well. And as always, we promise we will be finishing on the hour at 10:30. So once again, thanks for joining us. Sit back, relax, and enjoy our wonderful global experts. Jeff, over to you.
Thanks so much, Christine. Right, I'm going to try and share my screen now, so let's hope it all works. Hopefully it's working. Yeah, can somebody just give me a verbal?
Yep, that's perfect. Yeah. Lovely. As always, beautiful color PowerPoint.
Okay. Yeah, well, thanks so much for inviting me. It's a real honor and privilege to be part of this series, which has been fantastic, by the way. Well done, Christine and team. So I'm going to talk for about 20 minutes about some stuff we've learned over the last 50 years, and also some stuff we haven't quite figured out yet, but I think we're on the road to doing that as we go forward. I'm going to speak for 20 minutes or less if I can, which means I'm going to go at speed, cover a lot of stuff, and probably say some things that are provocative, just to kind of maybe trigger a reaction from you. So forgive me from that. I think we're recording this so you can get to see this again if you want to. And I'm also happy for these slides to be shared. So let's progress. I'm currently the president of the International Social Marketing Association. So please, if you're not already, join ISMA or the European Association or one of the other global regional associations that are affiliated, because one of the things I think we've learned already is that we need a body of practice and people advocating for social marketing. We need to get a seat at the table at the higher policy and strategic levels, as well as doing all the great operational work that I know that many of you are engaged in. So please join, be part of this movement, promoting the uptake and use of quality social marketing. I wanted to say, just to kind of put my own kind of personal position here, is I'm a real advocate for markets and marketing per se. And I think the application of these understanding techniques and methodologies and philosophy in social fields is absolutely vital. This is a picture from Beirut. As you know, terrible destruction there. Some of the first people back in trying to make that city normal again are the traders. Markets and marketing and literally market stalls like this drive the world in terms of many progress in many ways. The power of marketing is huge. So let's not be crazy and ignore it. Let's use it and apply it for social good as well as economic good. What I'm going to do is try and use some of these honest serving men, these key questions, to kind of just pick apart what we've learned over the last 50 years in terms of social marketing. So I want to look at what, why, when, how, where, and who in relation to social marketing, but not necessarily in that order. And my view about where we've got to over the last 50 years in relation to social marketing is, I think we're pretty clear about what social marketing is. It's still a contested issue, but we've made real progress there. I think we know how to apply social marketing principles. We've got lots of planning tools now about how to do that and evaluation mechanisms. About why to apply social marketing. We're pretty clear about that, its benefits. How mixed. There are lots of, as I said, planning tools and evaluation tools that we've developed, but there are still some black boxes in there about how to actually deliver in particular situations, and I'll say something about that. Who should apply social marketing? I think we're fairly clear about that. Basically, everybody up, mid, and downstream, and across multiple sectors. Two areas where I think we know less or figured out less is where we can apply social marketing and when, the context and situation in which social marketing can be applied. And I'll say something more about that as we go forward. These are the kind of 6 lessons that are kind of through what we've learned in relation to those questions. First thing we've learned is social marketing works. There's more and more evidence, published evidence, meta reviews, case study evidence that demonstrates if we apply these principles of social marketing, we increase the likelihood of effectiveness and efficiency. We know what social marketing key principles are. These are the key principles of social marketing endorsed by ISMA and its affiliated associations. These are not kind of aspirational or kind of theoretical. They're practice-based principles. And we know from evidence and evaluations, the more of these you do, the bigger the outcome. So it works. We know how to do it. We know what it is. The need to apply holistic understanding of human influence processes is the second big lesson I think we've learned. Is simplistic, unidimensional approaches to understanding and influencing behavior tend to be less effective than more complex and comprehensive approaches to understanding human behavior and influence. You will have seen, as I've done over the last year or so, that many countries have made huge mistakes in terms of seeking to influence people around the pandemic and other issues, environment and so on, because they've adopted 2 types of reductionist thinking. The first one being that human psyche and human beings are beset by biases. These biases distort information, and people basically are incapable of dealing with complexity and probability, and they tend to panic in situations. Well, the evidence over the last 18 months, if we didn't know it before, has reinforced the fact that that's not the case. The second problem with the mental model that's been applied in many instances is that this kind of idea of psychologism, where we reduce everything to be understood just using psychology as it impacts on individual choice. But we know this is simply not true. Humans are very pliable. They're very adaptable. They learn, they do make logical decisions, and they can apply a complex understanding to deal with complex issues. And this is Stephen Riker. He's one of the advisors to UK government. And what he's recently published is a critique of what's been happening. And what he's saying, and I absolutely agree with him, is becoming increasingly clear that this very limited approach to understanding people as the pandemic has evolved is shown that it's flawed, particularly when it comes to crisis situations. And last week in The Guardian, again, reports that SCI-B, which is the scientific group in the UK that advises government on behavioural influence, is being sidelined. When you look at who's on SCI-B in the UK, there are 27 people on that committee, and I think it's 23 of them are psychologists. There's no marketing person, there's no communications person, no advertising person, there's no design person, there's no anthropologist, there's no sociologist. No wonder some of the advice they've given has been pretty poor. So for me, one of the things we've learned is about understanding people and crafting interventions to help them is the future is fusion. We need to understand what's going on in people's brains, for sure, in terms of logic and rapid cognition, but we also need to understand social and economic influences, biological influences, and environmental influences. All of these impact on behaviour. Third thing I think we've learned is we need a full mix of interventions, not just nudging people or giving them information, but a whole mix of interventions using this full toolbox. The more of these tools we use, the probability, and the evidence seems to tell us, the more likely we will be to succeed. And that means that we need to move away from this information deficit model, which is still prevalent in many social programs. Let's just give people information that will help them change. But again, we've learned over the last 50 years, great comms, well-targeted, appropriate communication, consistent communication is very powerful as one of the tools, not the answer. So other things can really help, like smacking people, introducing charges, not forcing, but certainly strongly encouraging people. Say France, if you look at this slide, the graph there is vaccination uptake in France. Why did we get the big spike? That's when the government introduced the need for a COVID pass to enter restaurants, cinemas, theatres and public transport. Sometimes we have to shift people using these kind of shove and smack approaches, as well as voluntary change related to information giving. Fourth thing we've learned, the power of systematic action across sector and across disciplines. So working at macro, meso, micro levels in a systems-based approach, and also working across sectors, making sure that the commercial sector, the NGO sector, the public sector are coordinating their efforts and drawing in a whole range of different disciplines, some of which I've already mentioned. So systems analysis, understanding a problem and its complexity, and then developing multi-system intervention points. Fifth thing we've learned, almost there, the benefits of focusing on citizen-driven informed value creation. Marketing, if it's nothing else, and social marketing, if it's nothing else, it's about understanding and helping to co-create with our clients some value that leads to personal and social good. The more effort, it seems to me, we've learned that we put into understanding and working with and through the people that we're trying to help, the more chance we've got of being successful. One of my favorite economists is Friedrich Hayek, and he talks about the fatal conceit. And the fatal conceit is thinking that experts know best. Policy fails when it's driven by experts. Policy succeeds when people who are the recipients of it are engaged in its development, generation, and delivery. And we've seen examples around the world of the people pushing to have their voice heard, to help create better solutions for problems that we face. So people as experts. A great example of that, if you don't know, the Zoe Symptoms Tracker, citizen science-driven data program that tracks COVID infection and symptoms faster and more accurately in many instances than government epidemiological tracking. The last thing I think we've learned is the importance of applying social marketing principles, not just at an operational level, but also at a strategic level. We've got, as I've mentioned already, a whole load and more coming, great planning tools, checklists, and models that we can now apply. There's a really rich variety of those to select from. But we need to be moving marketing and social marketing input in the policy field, I believe, upstream, so we inform strategy and policy selection as well as just operational delivery. So making sure we're making a contribution at all of these levels enhances the impact of programs. Again, that's one of the big lessons I think we've learned over the last 50 years. So just going back to this list of things where we've made good progress and areas where we need to make some more progress. So the how to apply where and when questions, I think, are still open. I just want to say a few things about those. So in relation to how, one of my questions I'm asking myself and I'm trying to work through is, are social marketers facilitators or managers? Is it our job to help develop and impose and deliver social marketing programs? Or is it our job, and these things are not necessarily mutually exclusive, our job to facilitate the development of these kinds of interventions, working with clients, stakeholders, and funders of programs? Where can we apply social marketing? Can we apply social marketing in all situations? And when should we not apply social marketing? Can, for instance, non-democratic, illiberal countries apply social marketing or not? Is it possible? Can we apply social marketing programs in places like Afghanistan or China or other countries that don't follow a Western kind of democratic free market economy kind of process? And when can we apply social marketing? Are peace and security prerequisites? What other safeguards need to be in place before we can apply social marketing in its fullest sense? These are some questions I think we still have to work our way through. Lastly, just to say, my personal view is that we do not live in a moral vacuum. And there are a number of key principles that underpin sound social policy and ethical social policy. And whilst I'm very aware and alive to cultural differences and the need to respect them, there are some things that I do think we need to stand against. This is a picture from Simon Stevens, who's a great picture. This is in Afghanistan, a 45-year-old warlord and his new bride-to-be, who's 12. To me, this is wrong. And I think we should stand against this. So I don't think we live in a moral vacuum. I think social marketing needs to be clear about the principles that underpins its practice. And Ross Gordon and myself have put this kind of little list together of some of the social marketing values that underpin practice and ones that we should be developing into ethical codes of practice. So it'd be interesting to discuss with you about this today, your views about this. But I think some of these principles, in a sense, are not up for negotiation. They represent ethical practice, as far as certainly I would support. So very happy to have a debate about that. Lastly, then, just to finish, I think the last thing we've learned, just to sum up, is the new challenge. If we're going to work effectively with communities and individuals, we need to be more respectful. We need to be more humble about the way we go about doing things and what we know, what we can contribute and bring to the table. And we need to put more effort into empowering the people that we're seeking to serve. And I think this is a much more democratic and also personally rewarding way to work. This is the last slide. And it's very much not about a focus on individual change or victim blaming. It is about making a contribution alongside many other disciplines to a more participatory approach to social transformation and improvement. Thanks so much.
Jeff, thank you, as always. So invigorating and so interesting, and you raised so many questions. I am going to have to sit on my hands for the moment because there are a few issues there I would love to hear your perspective on, but I will hold off because I know we have a second speaker, Suzanne Suggs, is going to join us for another breathtaking presentation as well. Suzanne, over to you.
Thanks, Christine. Can you see one slide?
Yes, thanks, Suzanne. Perfect.
And thank you very much, Jeff. Really, as always, not just inspiring, but really a reality check on where we have come and where we need to go in social marketing. And I couldn't agree with you more, as usual. So, hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, in case you're not in this part of the world at the moment. My name is Suzanne Suggs, and I'm really honored and thrilled to be here with you today. So, when I was asked to talk about the anniversary of the first publication of social marketing, I thought about, what could I say at this moment? There's been so much literature. We're all, we're active in the field, we're active in research and practice. And so I came up with a perspective on just highlighting, how far we've come, but also how far we have to go, given the current state of affairs in the world. So I want to first focus on, the fact that we have come a long way as a discipline, as a science, as an implementation science, and as a practice, which I think is one of the very incredibly unique and also exciting things about social marketing, is that it truly is a multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary approach to both doing research, using that research to inform policy and practice. And so some of you probably will have seen this slide here. This comes from one of Nancy Lee's and Kotler's books. I'm just giving us a brief history of social marketing until the early 2000s. When it was first introduced, the famous article by Kotler and Zaltman in 1971, and then when World Bank and others started to embrace it, first articles printed by Lefay and Flora. And then in the 90s, the first academic programs in social marketing started. And this is where we've come a long way in training in social marketing, but we still have a long way to go. In the 2000s, you can see, I'm not going to read you the list, but lots of activities happened in social marketing and many more since the early 2000s. So what I thought I would do is just focus a little bit on my own history in social marketing and my own perspectives, which is, I think, why I was asked to speak with you all today versus reading you articles, but to give you my perspective on this. So back in 1995, I earned my bachelor's degree in marketing with a minor in fashion. I was doing fashion marketing. Those of you who know me, you know that about me, but you also chuckle because I really don't care about fashion anymore. However, I do care about sustainable fashion, and my roots in the fashion industry have formed a lot about what I do in social marketing. And now I'm very fortunate at my university to teach a course in sustainable fashion, where we talk a lot about the ugly side of fashion and how we can make the industry better. So I was introduced to social marketing in 1997 when I was working on my master's degree in health studies, and I had a course that introduced us into social marketing, and it's the first time I had heard of social marketing. And at that time I thought, well, this is just marketing, but it's for good. And I really underestimated it. I approached it very much as interventions that were meant to empower people, motivate people, get people to just do it, and I vastly underestimated it. However, that thinking really stuck with me as I moved along, and I worked for companies. I worked for companies focused on behavior change, and we developed interventions, multimedia behavior change interventions. And then when I moved into my first professorship at Emerson College and Tufts University School of Medicine in Boston, Massachusetts, where I taught social marketing. And again, there I was still very focused on this approach to, social marketing is about campaigns and interventions. And it's really about teaching people skills and motivating them to do better. Well, as time goes on, we all wise up, at least we hope we wise up. And since 2007, I've been a professor in Lugano, Switzerland, the southern part of Switzerland, the Italian-speaking part of Switzerland. And here I'm a professor of social marketing. I was a co-founder of the European Social Marketing Association, along with Christine and Jeff and several others. And I now have I understand social marketing from a different perspective. You know, with age comes some wisdom. And so I want to share with you a little bit about what we have done and where I think we need to go. So after coming to Europe, I had the great fortune of writing a paper with Christine and Paolo about social marketing here in Europe. Prior to coming here, I really understood social marketing from a North American perspective, having been in the United States and Canada, and then reading primarily international literature coming from Australia. I had been part of the Social Marketing Association of Massachusetts, but there was not an international association when I arrived here in Europe. There was not a European association when I arrived here in Europe. And so we got an opportunity to write a commentary in the International Journal of Healthcare Management about social marketing here in Europe and how it is similar, but also some of the unique challenges we have facing Europe. And so I encourage you to take a look at this article. It was a great writing experience, but it also helped me open my mind to a few things and also be able to put those down in paper and share those with others. So as I mentioned, I also helped to co-found the European Social Marketing Association along with Christine and Jeff. And I'll just give you a quick introduction and overview of how this association formed. So back in August of 2009, we had a meeting in Lugano here, and we had Francois Lagarde, Giuseppe Fattori, Christiana Lelig, and myself went and had a good pizza at a good pizzeria and some vino, and we talked about social marketing in Europe. And we kind of came up with the idea that, you know, maybe we need an association, maybe we need something that could bring people together. And so we took that further. And as you can see here, we went to the World Social Marketing Conference in Dublin in April 2011. A lot of things happened between that time in August of 2009 and April 2011. But here we all presented at a panel discussion at the World Conference, the idea of a European association. So we were testing it out. What do people think? What do people need? We weren't even sure people would attend the session. And it was a huge auditorium room full of people eager to get active together in social marketing in Europe. And so we did some research following that, and we conducted a survey of European social marketing and the social change community in Europe. And I'll just give you some brief highlights of what we found, because all good social marketing is based on good quality research. So we did our research before we just launched the association. We went from an idea to research and then to implementing. And we sent a survey around to our networks, over 500 people. And what we found were that most people were not a member of the ISMA. The ISMA had formed just during that time period. It was launched at that conference in Dublin, in fact. And we've got a representation from many European countries. And so what we realized is there was a gap. They weren't enrolled in the World Association, the International Association, and there was nothing yet here in Europe. So we asked about their support for a European association, and we found, of course, vast support. There might be a little bit of bias because these are people who took our survey, but certainly we saw a need, and the data showed us that we needed something to bring people together. So we asked lots of questions, but we also asked them, you know, what would be useful if we were an association? What do you want to focus on? And you can see here, by far, it was about networking. Collaborating on research was the top pick, but really about sharing and learning from each other, best practices. How do you do it? What's the process? What is the research evidence? And really sharing and networking. So we knew we had to do something, and of course we did it. But we also even asked about things like, what would you call this association? And I remember those conversations very clearly. People, we decided, of course, on the European Social Marketing Association, but of course people were saying, you know, can't you do something more creative than that? And we thought about it, but we came down to something that was just be at least very clearly understood by most people. We also even asked about the language of working. If people were confident in working in English as our primary language, given so many languages that we cover here in Europe, and the vast majority said yes. So that is our primary working language, although we're very respectful and know that's not easy for everyone. We came up with our first, pitch to be united with social marketing. And of course, you can see here too, we had our very first draft logo that did not stick. We created another logo. So we took these findings to a conference in London. And sorry, my title slide here is wrong, but this was a meeting in London that we had subsequently. And you can see a lot of familiar faces in this photo, I'm sure. And we talked about the findings. We talked about the need for the association. We had a sponsorship from Ogilvy, who allowed us to stream this meeting live throughout the World Wide Web, so that those people who could not make it to London were able to attend. And we launched the association. Following that, we've held 4 conferences. We hold those every other year from the World Conference. Our first conference followed very quickly after that in Lisbon and really kicked things off. Followed 2 years later, we went to Rotterdam, then we went to Espoo in Finland, and then Antwerp in Belgium. And we are eagerly awaiting the next meeting in Greece, scheduled for this April. It's been rescheduled for this April. And we hope that you can attend, whether that is in person or in a hybrid format. As Jeff mentioned before, as he is the president of the International Association, he's still on the board of the European Association. And since we started our work here, we've had associations pop up around the world. Now, Australia Association came before us, but they're still very, very active and doing a lot of great things for that market. We also have SMANA from North America. We have the Pacific Northwest also in North America. We also have the Latin Association of Social Marketing, and the newest association being that in Africa. We also have very local associations. So for example, here in Europe, if you're in Slovenia, there's a Slovenian Social Marketing Association. So one of the things that I would encourage people to do is get involved in your associations, get involved in the ESMA, the ISMA, and any local and more regional associations that you have within your community. A couple of years ago, several of us wrote an article about the history of social marketing and its coming of age. So we talked about a brief history of the community of practice, the profession, and the related associations with recommendations for growth. We published that in Social Marketing Quarterly. And again, that is part of the thinking I have in transitioning from a very campaign intervention perspective to a much more holistic perspective. So since this time, I have changed my way of thinking about social marketing, but not just thinking, but about doing. And so the projects that I work on now are much more multi-stream, multi-component, and multi-year. And so we've done together with the one person on this call, Maximilian Witz, we worked on testing techniques within social marketing. So in this case, we tested techniques for nudging to get people to reduce their cigarette butt littering. We did a project on Tap It Up that was very holistic, multi-year, multi-component, that focused on access to fresh water and healthy water so that you could tap it up, and also informing people and giving them augmented products to be able to truly drink tap water instead of buying bottled water. The FAN project was a multi-component, also multi-year project, aiming to get children more physically active and to eat better, using a holistic approach, working with communities and working with parents as well. Most recently, one of my favorite projects that I'm working on is a project with partners in Bulgaria, Spain, and Portugal. And we are working on social inclusion for those people who are living with physical disabilities. And we're using social marketing as an approach. And we're not focused on people with disabilities. We're focused on those social services and the social actors who are developing programs for people with disabilities, and politicians and urban planners to help them understand what they can do to facilitate social inclusion for those who are differently abled. I also am looking more at the determinants. So I'm really focused on the research side. What are the determinants of some of those big wicked behaviors that we address in social marketing? We're doing a longitudinal study of physical activity in children. It's a multi-year, multi-component, looking at all kinds of activities and reasons for inactivity, and not just motivation, but truly safety in neighborhoods, the built environment, cultural issues, economic issues, etc. And then we're informing policy here in Switzerland about making physical activity easier for young people. We're looking at xenophobia, specifically Islamophobia and hiring practices. So something we know in Switzerland and in many parts of the world, simply being Muslim or being perceived as being Muslim impacts your ability to get a job. And we have done a study and found just that front in workers in a grocery store, they were more likely to not hire somebody who was perceived as Muslim than they were to hire in the back end. So now we can inform policy about making that change. I serve on the science task force of Switzerland. We have 25 people on the task force, and I sit on that task force. And so with that opportunity comes a lot of responsibility, but it means that I also need to convey the science to our public health officials and our politicians in a way that resonates with them so that they can make those decisions and that impact the population. And so I really am focusing on facilitating better decisions and better policies rather than one-off interventions. While we need interventions, I'm just sharing with you where I am. So that's kind of, where we have been, where we have, where I've been and where I've come and where I've gone, but we still have a long way to go in social marketing. The relevance and the utility of social marketing has just simply never been greater. We have, the planet is confronting massive and multiple complex situations, including climate change, the ongoing burden of NCDs and NTDs. I hope that you can see my PowerPoint and not my text that I'm reading here. But what I have just written down some things because I don't want to miss something. We're facing an ongoing burden of NCDs and NTDs, xenophobia, as I mentioned, misinformation, and of course, the COVID pandemic. The recent IPCC report on climate change paints a really troublesome outlook for the future that can only be avoided and diverted through meaningful behavior change by people, but also businesses and governments. The health and environmental implications are not fully understood, but it would be an understatement to say that we're entering a phase that is historically unprecedented. The COVID pandemic continues to persist and flourish, and it's causing a lot of harm to people, economies, and despite the measures, despite the extensive lockdowns, and effective vaccines being deployed, we have not focused enough on creating value for vaccines. We have an under-vaccinated population in most countries, and new variants are emerging because of this that may threaten a lot of the accomplishments that we've made so far. So climate change together with COVID constitute unparalleled threats to public health, environment, economies, and society, and are very profoundly difficult to manage under the best of circumstances. But both problems are intensified by human behavior. The startling aspect to both climate change and COVID has been intensified by the widespread politicization of issues and science and more generally. The foundation of it being politicized has been the widespread dissemination of lies, misinformation, and seriously flawed communication, as Jeff already mentioned. Moreover, these lies and the misinformation have been encouraged, propagated, and even exploited by some of our politicians, social leaders, social vandals, and saboteurs. Most frustratingly for me is that despite the serious and potentially catastrophic place that we find ourselves in, the rejection of science is vast, and it has been passively tolerated by far too many reasonable people, sensible people who know better. They seem to lack confidence or will or something to do what's right and to offer support by insisting that we listen to science and we do better at listening to science. Medical doctors have a saying that many of you know, and I think that's something as social marketers we need to always consider, and that is to do no harm. I have seen time and time again where good social marketing efforts have seemingly good ideas, but end up creating a new problem or perpetuating a problem that they didn't think about in advance. So in our social marketing efforts, I think we need to really think carefully about what could happen from a seemingly good idea. Could we cause more harm? Could we perpetuate harm? Or could we cause another problem? Just as yelling fire in a crowded movie theater is not protected speech, intentionally engaging in behavior that is likely to cause harm, if not death, to other people is not protected individual behavior, nor should it be. In fact, imposing dangerous, harmful conduct on other people appears to have much more in common with human rights violations and the denial of individual rights rather than an individual right. The anti-science and the rejection of public health measures during COVID has radically altered the landscape for social marketing. It now appears that healthy behavior is viewed as an objectionable and threatening activity. For example, recent media reports of people getting attacked verbally and physically for wearing masks or promoting protection through vaccination. And these are by people who scream about their freedoms. This paints an alarming situation for me. Politicians, community leaders, social elites, and social media companies who use their position to influence or reject vaccination and masks are creating obstacles to solving the pandemic. This type of dangerous, short-sighted approach would have seen many of these same people reject the installations of lifeboats on the Titanic. And even where lifeboats would have been installed, these people would have refused to use them or even opposed other people using them because of their individual choice to go down with the sinking ship. Now we have even people who would pull people off of those lifeboats because of their own individual freedoms. To oppose lifeboats on any vessel is absolutely crazy. But we also see an increase in xenophobia, in particular towards Muslims, where people literally are being attacked physically and run over by cars because they wear the hijab or they pray to a different deity than the attacker does. And these very people are screaming that their individual freedoms are in jeopardy. Yet the circumstances that are surrounding social marketing find that social marketing is the only viable solution. I really believe that social marketing is the way forward and that we have to work really hard. So we have a long way to go. That's why I'm really confident, but I'm really also optimistic about the future of social marketing. The road is not smooth. Rather, it's going to be full of potholes and other obstacles, including a lack of funding to do proper formative research, to do longitudinal work, to publish research in our journals that is not just campaigns or case studies, and the lack of brave and courageous politicians and people in power who can do the practice and policy differently. This increases the importance and the urgency in our ability to communicate science to all people in a way that resonates with them, that shows them that this is about their prosperity and the best way to reach the good life. So we have come a long way, but we have a long way to go. I remain optimistic, but at this time in my career, I'm also really concerned. These massive and wicked social problems like pay equity, changing systems versus focusing on motivation, better education, upstream versus downstream efforts that we have today are some of the same issues, the same things that conversations in my classes back in 1997 when I was introduced to social marketing were taking place. This is when I first understood social marketing and how it's still some of the same problems we're facing today are still being understood. But I'm determined to be part of the way forward. I'm determined to raise the bar, and I plead with you and others to get involved, to publish your research as well as case studies, to plan beyond one-off communication campaigns and general social marketing campaigns, and keep on keeping on. We have a long way to go, but at the same time, I'm going to leave you with a quote from a famous health educator called Mohan Singh. I've adapted it slightly for the purposes of this talk. Remember, always be grateful for the millions of people everywhere whose despicable habits make social marketing necessary. Thank you.
Suzanne, thank you. Wow. I love the lens of your own journey through social marketing and how you have woven the moving from interventions to more long-term, multi-sector, multi-level, multi-year change as well. So thank you very much for those insights. Both of you raise incredibly interesting questions, but also questions that probably go to the very heart of humanity and humanity's survival on the planet. Because in your own different ways, Jeff talking to ethics, talking to social justice, Suzanne talking to democracy like Jeff, and bringing up that line between individual choice and collective choice. So I'm going to kickstart the questions, if I may, and ask both of you to talk about that, because I know it's a question also that Andreasen raised years ago about who decides what is right, who decides, you know, the overriding value that Jeff talked to, who decides what values override other values, or what rights override other rights. So where do we go? How do we, as social marketers, looking not just for behavioral change now, but for systemic change, how do we navigate that territory going forward?
Shall I start? Yeah, I think the clue is in the name. Social marketing. Social, you know, just to speak to that, you know, we are social animals. This is what we are. You know, we collaborate, we compete, we like to work and, you know, together on issues, figure stuff out collectively. This is an innate part of human nature. Marketing, another innate part of human nature. What do humans do? They trade with each other. How is their social developed? Often through markets. Reciprocity. I help you, you help me. I have something which I'll, you know, exchange with you. This is what has driven human progress, you know, around the world. So I think when we talk about social marketing, it is at the heart of future social development. And what is, in a sense, I still find quite incredible, is that we're still pushing for it to be there, to have a seat at the table. And other people have been much more successful. Let's take behavioral economics. I love behavioral economics. It's great insights in that, okay? But what is it? It's a, you know, simple little formula based on a very narrow understanding of human behavior and influence. Why has it been successful? There's been some really good advocates for it, but also the fact that it is presented as a simple, you know, solution. This is the solution, the solution. But what we know is there is no solution. There are multiple solutions that have to be collectively created, tried, tested, delivered, and learn, improve gradually as we go. That's the actual, you know, that's what the data tells us about how do you create and deliver successful social programs. So I think it's about, you know, it's about process, really. You know, it comes down to, there is no one answer to the moral issues, the social allocation issues, the technical issues. But what we have to put in place is sets of processes for working our way through these things. I mean, I don't believe in necessarily, you know, absolute moral absolutes. I don't believe in just having a relativist position, you know, depends on the circumstance and so on, and the culture. I think it's about putting in place processes for working our way through those hard questions. And social marketing is actually quite good at that. One of the things I love about it is it's becoming less of a black box. You know, we have systems and processes for understanding problems and then starting to create solutions for them, you know, collectively. So, yeah, I don't know, that's a ramble. That would be my response.
Yeah, no, I think that's very valid, Jeff, because to some extent, and you put it up in one of your PowerPoints there, you know, you talked about peace. To some extent, social marketing is about peace negotiations between, and I'm not using the word peace negotiations as in war scenario or context, but peace negotiations where you have conflicting values, conflicting needs, where you have conflicts of interests, you know. So there may be a whole toolkit there when it comes to peace negotiations and peace building that could be of value to social marketing going forward as well. Suzanne, what's your take?
Yeah, I think, you know, this is an important question that in the courses I teach in social marketing, we always start with this in the first couple of weeks. You know, who decides what is a social problem that we can address through social marketing? And my answer is that it's the communities themselves. And the reason is that, you know, a social problem exists when enough people recognize that it is a problem and that we can do something about it. And it should be within the community. Otherwise, we run the risk of, people flying in, helicoptering into your community, telling you all how bad it is and that you need to change and be more like us. And then we leave and we haven't fixed the problem. In fact, we probably created more. And this is something that, unfortunately, many donor agencies are incredibly guilty of doing. And so I think that, who decides, certainly it's based on data. Of course, it's based on data, but there also has to be a recognition at the local level that this is something that bothers us, that's not okay, and that we want to address. And that's how you're going to facilitate change, because you also, as we know in social marketing, to be really effective, you need buy-in from the community. You need participation from the community to design their own solutions that fit them. And so if they don't recognize there's a problem, then you're very unlikely to get all of these things that follow. So certainly in some cases we have to do some awareness raising at the beginning. But who decides if it's a problem? The communities themselves.
And Suzanne, what about, I'm going to come in there, Jeff, because I think you may have an answer to this too. Like, what about where the community doesn't see it has a problem, but another community looking in at a community does, or a country doesn't see they have a problem, but another country does? What about that context? Who decides what change, if any, is needed in that situation?
It seems to me it's about dialogue in those situations, and it's about starting to putting, in a sense, being respectful, on both, if it's two parties, being respectful of each other and starting to listen more. I mean, it seems to me the foundation of most great social marketing work is deep contextual understanding of the people that you're seeking to serve. And if you don't have that, it's often not a meaningful dialogue. Whereas, if you can get people to start expressing, why they believe what they do, what their position is, and then there's some hearing of that, not just listening, but some hearing of that, then you can start to maybe find where, areas where you can create some positive momentum. There may be areas where you're still going to be in continuous conflict. And recognizing those and seeing how we can kind of mitigate the worst effects of that might be part of the strategy. But you may probably also find some areas where you can make some positive progress. I don't want to get political about it, but if you take the island of Ireland, is a great example of over the last 30 plus years, there's been a difficult dialogue between the various communities, but at least there is some understanding and some listening going on now, and many areas of positive progressive progress. So I think so the question, who decides what we do, the answer is we do, and it's about being respectful, working with communities so they can have that understanding and start to map out what some of the solutions might be.
Okay, and kind of building on that, here's a question, Jeff, for you. So we're looking at social change projects, and very often the target audience is passive or they're resistant to change. So strategically, what are the ways of increasing participation and buy-in among passive stakeholders that you have experienced work?
Well, again, it's about understanding what will motivate them and what won't. And if you don't have that research, if you can get lucky and guess at something and it might work, but unless you understand it, then it won't work. So I think particularly in areas where you're going beyond voluntary compliance, where there's either some threat or penalty, or even in a situation where you're starting to give people rewards, financial or cash equivalent rewards, you really need to understand how people are going to respond to those either threats or punishments or rewards before you start to instigate them. I think the example in the recent from the last couple of weeks in France, everybody predicting that very low uptake amongst French people and a lot of hesitancy. Well, you tap into things that they really care about, going to restaurants, theatres, using public transport, then they're prepared to accept collectively those restrictions on their freedoms. Or if you want to look at it the other way, you're giving them freedoms, providing they're vaccinated. So I think it all comes down to what are all three of us have said is understand the people that you're seeking to serve. And also, wherever possible, my experience has been, even once you've got that understanding, you need to go and pilot it before you go and do it big scale, because the fines or the penalties or the rewards may backfire. I've examples in Brighton where there are rewards for people giving up smoking, cash equivalent rewards. Got a huge amount. The people themselves liked it, the smokers or people who wanted to become ex-smokers liked it, but the rest of the community, a lot of them didn't think it was a good idea to be rewarding people for giving up smoking. So there's a lot of civic pushback against things. So yeah, I think you have to get stuff that works for people who you're trying to help, but you also need to get use interventions like that are generally seen to be fair, equitable and proportionate by the general population as well.
And Suzanne, what kind of tools and practices are you finding that work well with passive or resistant audiences, especially as you've moved from intervention to more multi-level, multi-time campaigns?
I think the simple question is something that Jeff says often is make the behavior, popular, make it easy. And so we did that in our Tap It Up project. We didn't, everybody was drinking PET bottled water on our campus. And so what we did is we worked with administration to install water dispensers to make it easier. We bought environmentally friendly reusable bottles that we made that were tested to be student friendly, attractive, and were was at the right price. And we made it popular. The more that people were, bringing their own water bottles and refilling them, the more other people felt pressure to do it. We created value for doing it. We made it really fun. And then at the same time, we educated on the harmful on plastics and the harmful overuse of plastics. So it was about creating value and about really doing a multi-component project to make it just really easy and make it really something people wanted to be part of.
And taking both of those lessons on board, I'm going to have to stick by my promise to our target audience. We said we would wrap up on the hour, and we are just about to hit 10:30. So to people who've joined us from across the pond in America, from across Europe, and from Irish colleagues, I'd like to thank you. And I would also like to extend a huge Guramahagat, our Irish, for thank you to Jeff and Suzanne. Absolutely fascinating insights and incredible, valuable lessons there about where social marketing has come from, but most importantly, where we're going and how we can leave the world a better place. So for now, huge thanks to everybody. And we look forward to seeing you at our next session. Jeff, Suzanne, thank you. Thank you.
Pleasure. Enjoyed it.